All right, so welcome everybody to this 8th webinar in the Earth Science Information Partners Data to Action webinar series. This webinar series, which is continuing through the rest of the year, follows ESIP's 2019 theme of increasing the use and value of earth science data and information, which was one of several goals identified in ESIP's most recent strategic plan. I'll note that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube after it ends. So, for more than 20 years now, ESIP has helped members of the earth science data community find each other across the federal, private, and academic sectors and work together. ESIP does this by fostering rich collaborative experiences, including the 2 in-person annual meetings, 30+ community-driven collaboration areas around common data challenges, and through seed funding to further data interoperability. ESIP is funded by NASA, NOAA, and the USGS, and currently has more than 140 partner organizations that span the federal, private, and academic sectors, as well as many individual participants. So ESIP's vision is to be a leader in promoting the collection, stewardship, and reuse of earth science data, information, and knowledge, and to be responsive to societal needs. We believe that by connecting people across the data lifecycle and across sectors, we can help people to leverage their collective expertise and technical capacity to address challenges related to the creation, management, distribution, and analysis of earth science data. Today, we welcome Leslie Wyborn and Erin Robinson and a couple of special guests that they will introduce. I'll first share a quick bio for each of them. Leslie is an adjunct fellow at the National Computational Infrastructure NCI Australia, and the Research School of Earth Sciences at the Australian National University. She also works part-time for the Australian Research Data Commons. She previously had 42 years of experience in Geoscience Australia from 1972 to 2014, where she worked both in scientific research in geochemistry and mineral systems, as well as in geoscientific data management. In geoinformatics, Leslie's main interests are developing international standards that support the integration of earth science datasets into transdisciplinary research projects and in developing seamless high-performance datasets that can be used in high-performance computing and cloud environments. Among her numerous awards, I'd like to point out that Leslie received ESIP's 2019 Martha Maiden Lifetime Achievement Award, which honors individuals who have demonstrated leadership, dedication, and a collaborative spirit in advancing the field of earth science information. Erin Robinson assumed the role of Executive Director of the Foundation for Earth Science, as it was then called, in November of 2014. Prior to that, she worked for the organization as the Information and Virtual Community Director. She leverages her knowledge of environmental informatics, in particular collaborative web technologies, to support the diverse communities of practice that make up ESIP. Her current research interests include improving collaboration among distributed partners by enhancing connections at various levels in the interoperability stack, coordinating events to enhance human-to-human relationships, developing collaborative sites that integrate social media to facilitate knowledge exchange, and sharing Earth observations through standard data access. I think of both Leslie and Erin as mentors, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this regard. I'm very excited to welcome them here today to speak. So with that, I will pass the screen share to Erin.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Megan, for that kind introduction, and thank you, everybody, for your interest in this topic. This is a report back on ESIP's participation in the latest GEO plenary, which was last week in Australia, and how we tried to incorporate our theme of data to action into these activities. And as Megan mentioned, we will have a couple of other special presenters. We will have Jay and Francois Perlman talking about GeoValue, and then we'll also have Bob Downs talking about the data stewardship and data management activities going on within GEO and how they relate to ESIP. So just a little bit of background for those that are unfamiliar with GEO. GEO is the group on Earth observations. They advocate for Earth observations as an important and useful way to highlight irreplaceable resources. They partner with stakeholder communities to foster long-term partnerships, and they deliver data, information, and knowledge through a system that you may have heard of called Gios, the Global Earth Observing System of Systems. And I think GEO has been around since 2005, I think. And they are in their second decade. And one of the things, they have a new executive director, and really, I think, have this plenary highlighted a lot of the action that was going on within the GEO community. Just a little bit more about who constitutes GEO. They are convened with member countries. So there are 108 member countries, and then ESIP participates in GEO as a participating organization, and there are 132 participating organizations. These tend to be NGOs primarily from around the world. Some of the others that you would recognize are the Open Geospatial Consortium, UCAR, CODATA, WDS are just a few that are kind of in our space. And then they had a new membership model, or a new activity membership type of GEO associates. And so at this event in Canberra, there were many industry partners. These GEO associates are industry partners, and they are really looking to grow this relationship between countries and NGOs and industry partners. Just to give you a bit of an overview of where we were last week, the first 2 days were comprised of side events. Targeted key side events were sort of the top level, and then targeted side events, which I'll talk about one, and Francois will talk about another. And then Wednesday and Thursday were really the main event of the GEO plenary, where all of the delegates were together. And then the industry track was also going on in parallel with those industry partners that I mentioned. This year, also, one other thing to note was that it was a ministerial summit. What that means is that mostly it's the environmental ministers from these countries also come together at the same time. And so it's sort of an extra special GEO plenary because of that ministerial summit component. So just to give you a summary of how we participated, ESIP has been a participating organization for probably the last 7 to 10 years. And there's always a sense of getting lost. And so we really went into this GEO week wanting to have some presence and something that we could talk about, and activities that we could engage on. And so we proposed a targeted side event that hopefully Leslie Wyborn will talk about, Data for Our Planet. So that happened at the GEO conference, and then we continued with a small group at the Australian Academy of Science, continuing to dive into this topic of data for our planet. On Tuesday, we really focused on data management capacity building. Carl was part of a key side event that happened around linking local to global information sharing. And then we also had an idea stage presentation on our work connecting with the Australian partners. And then Wednesday and Thursday, as I mentioned, was the ESIP. We participated as a delegate in the plenary, and we had one intervention, which I'll share, on supporting the GEO Knowledge Hub. And the slides will be shared after this, so you can read ESIP's full statement. So all countries and participating organizations are encouraged ahead of time to provide an official statement that goes to the GEO website and can be reviewed by all of the delegates. And then in addition, we have been working with a public relations firm on positioning ESIP, which was another one of our strategic goals. And so we timed a press release discussing ESIP's operational readiness levels with GEO Week, and I'll talk just a little bit more about that too. So a couple of, I think, big themes that came out through the week. One was GEO's interaction and I think strong support in working with Indigenous communities. This is something that is important to the Australians, and that was something that I think was present through the entire meeting. One of the things that they did was they had a hackathon where Indigenous youth defined problems that then they worked on providing Earth observations back, and there are details about that hackathon here on the GEO website. In addition, they had Indigenous delegates that were part of the US and the Australian delegations, as well as I think Brazil And they had a plenary speaker from the Cook Islands who also wove in some of the needs of the indigenous community that GEO could help support. Another major theme was around the Earth observation data clouds, public and private. And really there were two major announcements. One came from AWS and actually was really kind of the culmination of a lot of work that AWS has been doing with GEO and GEO partners. And there were several presentations from GEO partner countries who had received cloud credits from AWS in the work that they were doing. And then a new cloud announcement came from Google Earth Engine. Rebecca Moore was at GEO for this announcement, and they are providing $3 million in cloud credits to the GEO community, and there'll be a call for participation and ideas for these projects coming this fall. Another place where ESIP and GEO intersect is around capacity development, and this is a slide from Gilberto Cameron, the GEO Secretariat Executive Director, and he says that GEO needs to make a strong investment in MOOCs and online learning, which obviously is something that ESIP feels very strongly in, and we have the Data Management Training Clearinghouse to support in this activity. One of the other things that they shared was wanting GEO to provide more support and reproducible knowledge, and they're doing that through the GEO Knowledge Hub, which they had piloted ahead of this plenary. And so these are just a few slides showing kind of what they're thinking around the Knowledge Hub of bringing together training and documentation and software all into the Knowledge Hub that supports the GEO community. And this is something that I hope that ESIP will be able to support. And so this, again, not expecting you to read this now, but this will, this gives you a glimpse at our actual intervention during the plenary, where we expressed strong support of the GEO Knowledge Hub and hoping that we could work together so that we don't have multiple knowledge hubs, but maybe that there's some intersection there on a technical level too. So one of the places that I want to dive into, one of the first things that we did was a side event at GEO called Data for Our Planet, Increasing the Use and Value of Global Information Infrastructures to Support Resilient Cities, Disaster Risk Reduction, and Infectious Diseases. And I think that one of the things that you find when you work in these large collaborative activities is that you need to include a lot of different agendas. And so we were partnering with all of the groups that you see on the screen. And Megan, do you see Leslie online? No?
I do not.
Okay. So I'll just give you a brief overview of this. And I'm hoping we can switch to Google Chrome. So this gives you a sense of our agenda. And it was really, oops, sorry. That is Francois' bio.
So Erin, we're only seeing the slides right now still.
Okay, I will stop and restart. Okay, so hopefully you guys are seeing, this is our agenda for the side event that we did. So we had a 1 hour sort of brief introduction to many different kind of applications around Data for Our Planet. And Data for Our Planet is a CODATA and an international Science Council initiative that we were leveraging. And so we had several invited talks. One is on the pilot case studies. That's where the disaster risk reduction, infectious diseases, and smart cities came in. Francois talked about GeoValues in this session around the sort of societal challenges. And then we had some infrastructure talks from Ben Evans from NCI, who was local, and also from ENVRI, who was another co-sponsor of that activity. It was well attended. I think that,
Erin, Could you enlarge the screen a little bit, or the print, the font?
Yes.
Thank you.
Try this. How's that?
Much better. Very nice.
Great. Thank you. So then we were fortunate that Leslie is the chair of the Australian Academy of Science National Committee for Data and Science, and the Australian Academy was willing to host us at the Academy, which was just a short walk from the GEO venue. And there we really dived deeper into the pilots that I had mentioned, the CODATA pilots, as well as we had a great presentation from Stefano Nativi on the GEO and the Gios perspective. And then we got into more of a data discussion coming from both data providers and infrastructure providers. And I think really the takeaways from this session for me were that there was a strong emphasis, and unexpected, I guess, for me, a strong emphasis on the fact that this kind of session and this sort of work that happens within GEO, it happens within ESIP, is really informal collaboration. And what we're looking for is more formal, like a formalized credit for this sort of informal collaboration was one key takeaway. And then that there was interest in continuing to work together. And so I think that I hope to synthesize more of this work. This is still very fresh, and come back with some things that we carry forward in the next year. So I'll head back to my presentation. And I think maybe one other takeaway, since we mostly have US participants on the phone at this point, was the connection between the informatics community, and particularly the earth science informatics community, has been very focused in the global north, and GEO and CODATA both have more connections into the global south, and that these problems that we're solving are not, we know that they're not just US problems, but that they're problems that we could benefit from expertise around the world, and we could also increase efficiency, I think maybe is the best way to put that. So we're definitely looking for ways that we build out more international connection and have more connections into the global south. And then, as I mentioned, within GEO, they talk about Earth observations in the news. And one of the things that we shared as part of that Data for Our Planet was this operational readiness levels concept, and a press release around the operational readiness levels. I think that this is exciting because it seems like many groups, not just ESIP, are really interested in how do you bridge that gap between the research products and getting it used in more in decision support workflows, in industry workflows. And this is one concept of identifying and classifying data around these operational readiness levels. And this is something that the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster of ESIP has led the charge on, and that we are, I think, really excited about how they might potentially be used. And it falls into a theme of providing users with many different ways to classify data, not just, sort of the bucket that we hear of analysis ready data, but that there are many dimensions of data that we could be talking about. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Francois Perlman. And I did just put her bio in the chat. But Francois has been leading the effort as the director of Four Bridges, a nonprofit corporation, on GeoValue, which has been an activity ongoing with GEO. And I will pass it to Pearlman and let her tell you about GEO.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Actually, GeoValue has been existing for about 10 years approximately, where we started to...
Francois?
Yeah.
We can't see your screen. You're not sharing anything.
That's right.
Okay. Oh, I just emailed you two charts, two files.
Okay.
Why don't we just do it verbally?
Let's do it verbally, and we'll provide the charts afterwards.
That sounds perfect. I do have your your 2 charts from that you sent to the group, the summary, if those are the same.
There are part of it. There are a few more, but let's go with those, and I'll just talk about them. So GeoValue focuses on the value of Earth information. And by value, we mean a value from a dollar and cents standpoint, but also from a qualitative life standpoint as well. We had at Geo a couple of side sessions, one on Monday and one on Tuesday, and then also the director of Geo Secretariat made some interesting statements later on the Wednesday, which I will talk about briefly. So first of all, our first session was basically an introduction to what we have done in GeoValue, and some discussion with a number of people who were either involved in the past or were involved in this organization.
If other people lose.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we can get them back.
It looks like they went offline.
Yep, maybe they're back. Francois, are you there?
Achieves evaluation, because you have to have both the
Hey, Francois.
Yeah.
We just lost your audio for maybe a minute, but it seems like you're back now.
Okay.
Sit there otherwise.
Let me try and continue, and if we lose it again, then I'll move.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so I mentioned Tim Stryker from USGS talked about the various roles of valuation, like budget, policy, and multidisciplinary, because you have to include both economists and scientists from both a social and from a scientific natural science viewpoint. There also Max Relia, who's been involved for the last 10 years, stressed the fact that there is not a single approach. Originally, we thought there might be, but there are a number of approaches, and items that are critical is trust, and we need a techno-economic approach to address the future of socioeconomic characterization. So that's what happened during our first session. The second session, which was also addressed that, but in more detail, talking about use cases. And then out of both of those, we came up with a single chart to present in the plenary, although I don't think it was briefed. It was shown. And this GeoValue, understanding the value and impact of Earth observation, had 3 elements. We need a library of Earth observation valuation studies to inform decisions and policies. We need a framework for collection and easy access to analysis to build trust and transparency, moving from data to decisions, from Earth observation to end users, reflecting the full value chain. And we need a process to identify best practices and to encourage their use for supporting geo projects. The next item, which was brought up by Gilberto, and you don't have that one, but Jay is going to bring it up on this computer. There was a question during the session, during the plenary. There was a question by Switzerland about, hang on just a second. And Gilberto was answering that question by stressing two pieces of the puzzle which are missing. He said that one is socioeconomic data and the other one is impact assessment. And Gilberto said those were lacking. And I'm reading something that just disappeared. Anyway, so I will.
No, it's right there.
Okay. So these two pieces are lacking at the moment. And he was actually issuing a call for contribution by the community. He says we need to include impact assessment studies in the GEO work program. And to be quite honest, this is a big missing piece in our work program. These are needed if we want to reach out to decision makers. Now, it turns out that GeoValue used to have an element in the work program on this topic. For some reason, it fell out and disappeared, and we're now in the process of recreating it, and we'll have that done by the end of the year. And Erin is one of the people who is contributing to this activity. Do you have any questions?
I wonder, Francois, if maybe you want to make the request, you ask about, or we're talking about developing use cases, and I think that some on this call might be interested in participating in that. So how would people, if other people are interested in getting involved in this work, how would they get involved with this activity?
We are looking at putting together a small group at this time for that very purpose. And the best way is to send an email to either myself or Jay. We have had 2 or 3 people who have reached us so far, indicating that they were interested in either contributing use cases or case studies, depending on which community you come from. Also, we would like to define a framework, because you really need an environment and an understanding of what the environment is like, so that the case studies are reasonably consistent in their in what they include. And we've started defining a framework as a library of case studies, including exemplars and training tools, including ontologies for valuation and impact assessment, and looking for community engagement. So if anybody in the community is interested, please reach to us. We are looking at essentially a systems engineering approach to defining the framework, and then a generation of multiple case studies of using a value chain. Basically, what you're looking at is the various steps in the value chain, starting from data and all the way to decisions.
Right.
Make a comment.
Sure.
Erin, let's talk about schedule for a second. This is Jay. We are looking at building the use case compendium library starting almost immediately and for the next year. We're going to be looking at creating a library in the next 6 months, all things willing. And we have a workshop on GeoValue in Canada. It'll be probably either late August or early September in Montreal, supported by the Canadian Space Agency. And I should emphasize that in this GeoValue process and the value chain, we include a lot of work on data and how it's used and the particular activities related to both the collection of data, but the dissemination and use of that data. So if anybody's interested in participating with us and also in the workshop in 2020, mid-2020, as Francois said, contact either of us.
Great, okay. And if you could put your email in the chat, but we'll also, I can help connect people if afterwards you're curious or want to get involved. Great, thank you so much. And thank you for your willingness to do this in near real time following Geo. So I think now we'll move to our next speaker, which is Bob Downs. Bob is familiar to probably many of you. He's a Senior Staff Associate Officer of Research and serves as the Senior Digital Archivist and Acting Head of Cyber Infrastructure and Informatics Research and Development at CIESIN at Columbia University. And he holds a PhD in Information Management from the Stevens Institute and has been heavily involved in Geo over many years and was part of some of Geo's data management and data sharing activities. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Bob, you have to unmute.
Perfect. Still muted. Yes, we can hear you now. Perfect.
Oh, thank you very much, Erin. And yeah, I'll be talking about the Group on Earth Observation System of Systems Data Sharing and Data Management Working Group. In order to do that, though, I'm going to first give you a little bit of background. Oh, interesting. Maybe I need to. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the work of the data sharing and the data management working groups, which originally were two separate working groups. The Gios data sharing working group is actually one of the original working groups that started at the beginning of Geo over a decade ago. And out of their efforts, one of the big things that came out was the Gios data sharing principles. And there are 3 of them, and they're really quite simple. And basically, the first one is open by default. That is, the data would be made available, and there would be no charges or restrictions on reuse, although there could be conditions such as registration and attribution. second Gios data sharing principle is that they should be made available with minimal restrictions and no more cost than the cost of reproduction and distribution. And then the third one is that they would be made available in a timely manner. And so for the Gios data management team, they came up with the Gios data management principles. And you can see here there are 5 categories: discoverability, accessibility, usability, preservation, and curation. Altogether 10 principles, and some of these you'll recognize as being important for what it is we do when we're managing data, such as discoverability, having metadata; accessibility, having it online; for usability, having data encoded; documentation, traceability, and quality control; for preservation, not only data preservation, but the data and metadata verification; and then under curation, data review and processing, as well as persistent and resolvable identifiers. So in the new work program, one of the foundational tasks is Gios data, information, and knowledge resources. And within that task, the new Gios data sharing principles and data management, I should say the data sharing and data management working group has been formed. And so these two groups, the data sharing working group and the data management task, are now combined in this part of this foundational task. And what we're trying to do is to increase the sustainability of these systems, increase the number of data sets available, and making them adhere to the Gios data sharing and data management principles, and then reducing the barriers as well. And so the purpose of the new data sharing and data management working group is to enable the effective uptake and implementation of the Gios data sharing and data management principles. And here are our duties. I'm not going to go through all these for you, but a couple of things I should mention here is we're focusing on open data and scientific data management practices. Of course, Gios data sharing and data management principles and how they can be implemented. And if we can improve those, that would be great as well. We're going to be advising Geo work program activities and advocating the value of open Earth observations data, and promoting coordination to implement the Gios data sharing and data management principles, and to monitor Earth observations data sharing, and recommending ways to advance interoperability, as well as describing best practices, and looking at ways in which we can monitor, interpret, and adjust metrics for the use of shared Earth observations data. So I should also mention that we've been working with the ESIP community previously on these groups. For example, a lot of ESIP people have been involved in the review of the Gios data sharing principles and the Gios data management principles. Last year, we reviewed them in tandem. Back then, it was a group or a joint group activity that ESIP contributed to, but now it's a combined group, and we are looking forward to more cooperation and collaboration with ESIP members on this. So right now, what we're doing is we're organizing. The group just started last week, and so we're identifying new co-chairs for the combined group, and identifying ways in which we can begin moving forward. So we're looking for any collaborations or collaborators who want to get involved with us, and welcome your contributions.
Great, thank you so much, Bob. Any questions for Bob? For me, this is one of the clearest sort of connection points of ESIP, and it's one I think that is a really important one to continue to maintain, and it's a place where I see us continuing to engage. So I think, Megan, if you want to take control back.
Yes, I will do that.
So it's a nice segue for ways that I, just in the few days that I've been back, I'm starting to think about how we continue to stay engaged with Geo over the next year. So next slide, Megan. So I think that you will continue to hear more about this collaboration around data for our planet with CODATA. So it's not really a Geo activity, but I think it has potential for connection to the Geo community. I should have mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that the ESIP delegation was comprised of Kathy Fontaine from Rensselaer Polytechnic, and then Carl Benedict, who's ESIP's president, and me. And Kathy serves on the Geo program board, which is another way that ESIP has a link into Geo activities. And so there was a renewal process, and we nominated Kathy again to sit on the program board on ESIP's behalf, and she will continue to do that for the next 3 years. We are looking for someone else who is interested in potentially being like a co-delegate in this position. Kathy doesn't want to do this more than 3 more years. And so I'd like to find some way to have some continuity in that position before Kathy leaves. Kathy has a wealth of knowledge about Geo, and it would be good for there to be some overlap, but I think it would also be nice to have somebody with, you know, a pretty good understanding or breadth of understanding of what's going on within the ESIP community too, so that there's a way to make these strategic connections that we've just seen this afternoon. I think that we will coordinate around both Geo's cloud and knowledge hub activities. That's maybe a newer area of interest. We'll continue to be observers and contributors to the working group that Bob just talked about. As Francois mentioned, I'm a co-lead on the GeoValue task, but we are very much looking for that to be an ESIP initiative and an ESIP community-wide activity, so there will be more coming there. And then I'd like to just maybe take a few minutes to see if there are any other ideas of contributions that we could be making to Geo from anybody on the call. Anybody have other thoughts of things that or ways that Geo could be contributing to us? I think it's definitely a two-way street.
Erin, this is Jay. I have one thought. One of the areas that we've talked about within Geo over many years, but has not been implemented yet, is to have a repository of methods for observation and best practices. And that, of course, ties closely to data and the way you measure data. And so we have created in the last 2 years an operational system of ocean best practices, which is under UNESCO. And for that, we are collecting use cases, or let's call it methods, best practices, for putting in the repository, and then also for training on a global scale. It may be that within Geo, they'll be adopting this, we're not sure, but there certainly is a broadening of it that might be of interest. So
Yeah.
We're looking for people to participate and ways to contribute.
Cool, okay. Great. I think, like I said, this has been an evolving effort, and Geo has been, I would say, a particularly tricky, you know, it's much like ESIP in the broadness and the distributed nature of all of the contributors. And so for me, this presentation has actually helped connect some of the ways that we've been working together to make an impact within Geo, and collectively make an impact altogether. Megan, just the last slide that I had in my deck. And then the last thing I wanted to share was Geo puts out a set of relevant docs, and so all of the statements, the agenda, are all found in that MediaFire website. There's no login needed, so you can check those out. And then the other thing that I think was new this time was that they streamed all of the plenary, many of, I think, the key side events. So Francois, I think that your side event was probably streamed and recorded if people wanted to go back and watch. And then all of the plenary was also recorded. So they did a really nice job of making Geo more accessible for those that couldn't travel. So with that, any questions for me or for any of the presenters? Okay, Megan, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming to this.
All right, thank you, Erin, and all the other presenters, and Erin especially for going with the flow here, as one of our speakers could not make it today. I wanted to share a few closing slides before we wrap it up, and one is to remind you that the 2020 ESIP Winter Meeting is now 55 days away. The theme this year is putting data to work, and ESIP meetings, if you are not aware, bring together some of the most innovative thinkers and leaders around Earth observation data, and we see a lot of collaborations formed at these meetings, and this is one of the reasons people find high value in them. We have an excellent lineup of plenary speakers, some of whom you see listed on the screen right now, and a great lineup of breakout sessions that will be announced by early next week. You can find out more details and register at this esipfed.org/WM2020 link. There are also a number of exciting events happening in conjunction with the meeting. One of them is the ESIP and OGC coverage processing and analytics sprint. There are many reasons to be excited and to join in if you can, and if you can't be there physically, there is the potential for remote participation, so we want you to feel included as well. In addition to coming to ESIP's in-person meetings, there are many other ways to get involved. You can join one or more of the 30+ collaborations that I mentioned that meet primarily virtually. You can encourage your organization to become an ESIP partner. You can learn more and tell others about ESIP using this URL on the bottom right-hand corner. It's a great one-pager describing ESIP in what I think are clear and simple terms. The best way to stay in the know about what's happening in ESIP is to join our Monday update mailing list. So there's this ePearl link up above that you can quickly sign up on. It's just one email a week, and it's a great way to keep up to date. Finally, a reminder that you can access all of the webinar recordings for this webinar series on the ESIP YouTube channel, including this one, very soon. I also want to mention that if you're heading to the AGU Fall Meeting, you can come visit ESIP and our partners at the Data Help Desk. You can learn more about this awesome event we're organizing at the bit.ly URL listed here. That brings our webinar to a close. I want to again thank all of our speakers and thank all of the attendees. We hope to see you at the next webinar, at the AGU Fall Meeting, and at the 2020 ESIP Winter Meeting.
Thanks so much, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.